So this morning I was doing research about a different subject for a different video, but I came across a piece of information that is probably very relevant in the context of the Oreshnik attack. If this is the first video of mine that you're watching, well, welcome. But for the returning viewers, it may seem that I am milking this story about the Oreshnik, but I am not. Just give me a few minutes. For those who have been living under a rock, the Russians on the 21st of November attacked the Yuzhmash factory in Dnipro with a new type of ballistic missile capable of deploying 36 kinetic warheads. These warheads impacted the ground at Mach 11, and they have done a yet undetermined amount of damage to the factory. This is the first time in history that a weapon like this has seen operational use. I think the importance of this weapon is that it gives the Russians a conventional long-range attack capability against area targets like factories, but also port facilities, railway nodes, or crucially air bases, which are the foundation of the NATO air power. I have already published 2 videos on this subject in the past few days. Feel free to go and have a look if you're interested. But I wanted to move on. So this morning I was reading this report from the Kiel Institute, which is assessing Russian military production and comparing it with the European military production. And in case you don't know the Kiel Institute, it is a German research institute based in Kiel, in Germany. As the name says, they are focused on global economy and globalization. That is to say, you can't really be more mainstream than they are, to be honest. So while reading, I stumbled upon this passage about supersonic and hypersonic missiles. One characteristic of the war in Ukraine is the mass use by Russia of supersonic and hypersonic missiles. This strategic bombing campaign has depleted Ukrainian air defenses, destroyed logistic nodes and command centers, and disabled almost all power plants. And since I know that some of you won't like what they have written, I point you to this note in the same report. Data on interception rates of hypersonic missiles is scarce. Ukraine claims a 25% interception rate for hypersonic Kinzhal and Zircon missiles. But Ukrainian sources also indicate such interceptions require a salvo firing all 32 launchers in a US-style Patriot battery to have any chance to shoot down a single hypersonic missile. So according to the Kiel Institute, supersonic and particularly hypersonic weapons are a problem, and I agree, coming from a different direction from my personal research. So this passage was not really unexpected, but what came after that made my jaw drop. Beyond the war in Ukraine, the diversification of the Russian hypersonic arsenal is a significant problem for Europe. It is certain that replenishing and expanding this strategic asset will be a priority for the Kremlin. A sufficiently large stockpile distributed across aircraft, surface warships, submarines and ground launchers opens the possibility of a decapitation strike that causes major damage to the other side's military capabilities and infrastructure in the opening phase of a conflict. Given the military asymmetry between NATO and Russia, a devastating first strike has long been part of the Russian toolkit. Stockpiling hypersonic missiles would unlock the potential for a conventional rather than nuclear first strike. There is no near-term defensive solution. A decapitation strike? Where is this coming from? The Russian doctrine is mostly defensive. Of course, they don't shun the attack because you can't really win a war or neutralize an opponent if you don't attack. But all their doctrine is based on defending the territory and the areas and the allies of the Russian Federation. What about this decapitation strike? So I went to check the references that they give on the report notes to understand what they were talking about. I know that the Soviets had something like this, the famous 7 days to the Rhine, in which they planned to use a heavy nuclear attack against Germany, Denmark, the Netherlands and northern Italy, as the opening gambit of a 7 days operation that was supposed to invade to the line of the river Rhine and the northern Italy to the line from Verona to Bologna. This was among the documents that at the end of the Cold War have been made public by the Polish government. If you look for it, you will find several references online. But the Russian Federation. So the Kiel Institute was referring to a post on the Financial Times where the newspaper was provided by unnamed NATO officers of some Russian plans they just managed somehow to put their hands on. Russian Navy's plans for a mixed conventional and nuclear attack plan on a number of coastal installations in NATO countries, in the Baltic, in Norway, but also in UK or France. It wasn't operational documents, it was more of a presentation, probably for some decision makers to present options in case of generalized conflict with NATO, and this goes back around 2008. From what I could read, it is not necessarily a strike-first plan, but it surely supports the existence of a decapitation plan of major NATO forces in case of generalized conflict. And this got me thinking. My thinking was that the Oreshnik was giving the Russians this type of deep attack capability that otherwise they don't have, or they have just to a limited extent. A weapon like the Oreshnik, a few hundreds of them, give the Russian the possibility to execute a decapitation strike on Europe at the beginning of the hostilities without resorting to nuclear weapons. This is a massive difference. We all agree that it is extremely difficult to intercept. The fact that it has so many warheads requires a huge amount of interceptors that are not going to be fielded anytime soon, if ever, and it is still below the nuclear threshold. Well, if this is not a game changer, I don't know what it is. In the previous videos I were mentioning that this weapon is a weapon for conventional deterrence, and it seems to be a textbook implementation. So this is the end. Thank you for watching. See you next time with something different. Trust me, with something different.